Okay, friends, I've been meaning to come on here and do this chat for a while, so let's dive into it. Let's discuss this retrograde soup we find ourselves in. Again, still, I don't know. So, y'all remember July? Maybe. July was the month that we had a lot of big planetary movers moving. We had another Mercury retrograde, and all of it was kicking off at about the same time. So I'm thinking of November as kind of like a July Junior, so to speak. And I know I'm late, but let's dive into this. Okay, first of all, little overview. We have Mercury retrograde, we have Jupiter, we have Saturn, we have Neptune, we have Uranus, and we have Chiron. And they are all in retrograde right now. So let's start with Mercury because Mercury is one of those ones that, we all know to be mad about, right? So Mercury started off in retrograde in Sagittarius and it has now moved into Scorpio. So we're having those communication errors, we're having those technical issues, we're having a lot of confusion and noise in our mind space. And that shit goes deep because we are in Scorpio, okay? Chances are it's tied to a lot of feelings, old grudges, old situations, old obsessions. So if you're feeling that stuff come up, just know that it's coming up so that you can see it more clearly, so that maybe you can find where this is coming from. Now, Mercury will be moving out of retrograde on the 29th, but of course we're going to have the shadow period afterwards, so I would be looking towards like mid-December to kind of feel relief from this one. But don't worry, there's more retrogrades to go over, so let's continue. So the next one that's going to be coming out of retrograde, and it actually happens just a couple days before Mercury comes out of retrograde, is Saturn. Saturn is one of those that went retrograde back in July, and it's been moving between Aries and Pisces. Still in Pisces right now, so really having us re-examine boundaries, re-examine, the work that we put into things, responsibility, discipline, and really making sure, did we pay attention to the message? Did we acknowledge the lesson? Now that one is going to be coming out of retrograde November 27th, but again, we're going to have a shadow period with that one too. Next, let's take a look at Saturn's buddy Neptune. Neptune has been right there conjunct with Saturn pretty much the whole time that they have been retrograde. Neptune is another one of those planets that went retrograde back in July, okay? And it's going to stay there until December 10th. So we can start to see the relief of this one around then, but again, longer shadow period after the fact. So there might still be some funky vibes around with that. Now, Neptune is more about the mystical things, okay? It can also be truth, our ideals, our intuitive pulls, things like that. Usually Neptune retrograde signifies some very big confusion and can tell us to be finding our truth, to be marching towards the truth. It's almost like that's the lesson of this planet. Okay, so let's talk about Uranus for a minute, okay? So Uranus actually went retrograde in September, but it's going to stay in retrograde until February 3rd. Not only that, but back in July, Uranus was the planet that moved from Taurus into Gemini. Again, big planetary mover, so that's kind of like big energy. Now it has retrograded back into Taurus. So really, this is asking us, have we learned the lesson of Uranus and Taurus before we move on to Gemini? Have we learned the earthly realm comfort lesson before we move into more of the mind chaos kind of lesson? Because y'all, again, remember July, right? It wasn't like the best for many of us. So Uranus is that revolutionary planet. Uranus asks us to be the rebel. So it's almost as if this rebellion has turned inward. So if you're feeling pulled in multiple different directions, could be that. Yeah. The goal of Uranus, though, is to help us better align with our most authentic selves, y'all. So anything that's coming up for you right now is to show you what no longer fits and is asking you to change that. Then, of course, we also have Jupiter retrograde, okay? And that actually kicked off last month and is going to end on March 10th, okay? And that is happening in the sign of Cancer. So if you're having a lot of big emotions, if you feel yourself turning inward more, if you feel like this, because Jupiter's usually about expansion, and usually expansion like outside of us, but when it's retrograde, the expansion takes place inside. So if you kind of feel like almost this energy of like crawling out of your skin in a way, that could be Jupiter. And big emotions, okay? Big emotions, big sadness, some nostalgia maybe. And our final retrograde that I'd like to talk to you about today is Chiron. Not a planet, an asteroid, but this is the wounded healer. So usually whenever I see Chiron in retrograde, this is a time where we can be diving inward and really working on our healing. We might be asked to revisit old pain, and usually this is a repeated pattern type of pain, something that keeps coming up throughout our life. It might be expressed differently, but it's usually something that keeps happening. This is another one that kicked off in July, okay? And this one's going to be ending on January 2nd. So all this to say, this retrograde energy is going to continue through the end of the year. All of it, though, is asking us to go inward, to pay attention to what comes up for us, to pay attention to the signs, the messages, the insights, the intuition that we feel, and to follow those pulls, to dive inside ourselves and to find the answers, or some semblance of an answer. So if you've been trying to accomplish a lot, if you've been trying to push yourself, if you've been trying, okay, if you've been really exhausting yourself trying and not really getting as far as you thought you would, it's probably because of this energy. And again, this is a time of looking inside of ourselves, okay? Asking ourselves questions about what's coming up for us, being willing to work on our communication skills, being willing to deal with the fucking tech issues, being willing to rebel a little bit as we continue to find our truth, as we continue to go inward and see what's there for us. Now is the time to expand inward, my friends, not outward. And for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, this kind of fits really well with winter coming. It's a time to rest, to reflect, to recharge. So I'm curious, what has been coming up for you lately? And how are you trudging through it? Of course, we could dive into this in a private reading if you like. I could pull up your chart and I can go over exactly how this is going to be showing up in your life. So reach out if you have any questions about that, or if you have any questions about this video at all. I'd love to go over this a little bit deeper with you. Anywho, I will see you guys next time. And just like July, we are in this together. We're going to get through. We've been through heavy retrograde seasons before, you guys, okay? Stay aware, stay mindful, and be willing to grow and change. I'll see you next time, friends. Bye.